So, you want to learn how to draw anatomy. Well, anatomy is a really complex subject that takes a lot of time and effort to master. So, to utilize my time, I've divided my anatomy studies into two separate types of practice. We have the light sketches and structure studies. Light sketches is basically like the warm-up. This is where we do easy tasks such as gesture drawings and some fundamental sketches, where you don't have to think all that much. Whereas the structure studies is the opposite. This is where we learn new stuff and apply them. This requires a lot of thinking and problem solving. We're going to be using these two concepts of studies and apply them in learning anatomy. So first up is light practice. This is the easiest part of the study. This is usually my daily warm-up where I practice some basic fundamentals to get in shape. If you're like me that's self-taught, you would probably skip the fundamentals part because you may think it's boring or it doesn't look cool. But think of art fundamentals as writing. Before you write, you have to learn the letters first, then the words, the grammar, and so on. In art, it's practically the same. You have to learn the basics first so that you can visualize your ideas better and even develop your own art style. So to practice, just draw some simple shapes and make them three-dimensional. The key here is you have to get used to how three-dimensional space should look like because we're going to be using 3D shapes throughout this anatomy video. Next up is gesture drawings. We can't have an anatomy video without gesture drawings. But why is it so important? Well, when I started drawing, I only practiced the face because it's the most pleasing thing that you could draw. And I didn't draw anything else, so I struggled drawing anything from the neck down. Until I decided to start doing gesture drawings every day, and it was an absolute game changer. Doing gesture drawing is a great practice to get familiar with the body. This gets rid of all the stressful details, so you don't have to get overwhelmed like with all the muscles. Do gesture drawings until it's engraved in your mind. That's how I get familiar with anatomy, even without any prior knowledge. By the way, this is not exactly the main way of doing gesture drawings. The traditional way involves a more fluid approach, and is usually done with live models or like people walking on the street. So what exactly am I improving with this? Well, this improves your observational skills. Light sketches forces you to observe and analyze the subject's movement and gestures quickly. This practice can help you develop your observational skills, making you more aware of the nuances of movement and body language. It can also develop hand-eye coordination as you learn to translate what you see onto the page or canvas quickly. Of course, this improves your understanding of anatomy. Gesture drawings can help you understand the underlying structure of the human form, as you learn to capture the essential movement of the body and how they relate to each other. This also trains your speed and efficiency. This is often done quickly, which helps you develop your speed and efficiency in drawing. Last but not the least, and what I think is the most important, which is overcoming perfectionism. Gesture drawing is often done quickly and without much concern for perfection or detail. This really helped me overcome perfectionism and focus on capturing the essence of the subject. Next one is structure studies. This is where we use our big brain, but at the same time putting in some time and effort. We're going to try and absorb anatomy knowledge as much as we can, but don't worry, it's going to be easier than you think. Okay, we're going to be studying the structure of the body, but using 3D shapes. Think of anatomy as food and 3D shapes as your eating utensils. This makes your food more edible. This allows you to consume knowledge slowly but surely, instead of biting in more than you could chew. And of course, you're gonna choke if you force yourself to learn, so take it easy. And that's basically the idea of this whole anatomy video, but it can be applied to literally everything. When drawing anatomy, you have to get used to simplifying things. Using shapes when drawing anatomy is a really helpful technique that can make the process more manageable and accurate by breaking down the human body into basic shapes such as spheres, cylinders, and cubes. This way, you can simplify the process of drawing and understand the underlying structure of the body. Using shapes when drawing anatomy allows you to create a framework for your drawing that can guide your proportions and ensure that your figure is anatomically correct. For example, you might use a circle to represent the head, cylinders to represent the arms and legs, and spheres to represent the joints. By starting with these basic shapes, you can refine your drawing and add more detail to create a more realistic representation of the human body. This technique are especially helpful for beginners who may struggle with proportions or understanding the structure of the body. Using shapes can also help you to better understand the relationships between different parts of the body. For example, you might use overlapping circles to represent the torso and hips, which can help you understand how the upper and lower body connect. So using shapes when drawing anatomy can be a helpful technique for simplifying the process of drawing and better understand the underlying structure of the human body. When studying references, it's not really necessary to create the perfect copy of the reference material, but it is important to capture its form or its most significant elements. This will help you gain familiarity with anatomy or any other subject you're studying. The process of repeatedly drawing or experience can help you internalize its details, allowing you to improve your understanding and ability to recreate it from memory. By studying references and practicing repeatedly, you can develop a deeper understanding of the subject matter and build your skills and expertise. Additionally, this process can be a rewarding and enjoyable way to learn and grow your knowledge and abilities. And now for the next method, we're going to use this specifically for anatomy, and I call it the divide and conquer. This is kind of similar to the food analogy I made earlier. Here, we're going to be dividing anatomy into parts where we study them one at a time. The study could span days, weeks, or even months, so don't worry if you feel like you're not improving. Okay, so this is basically how I divide the body. We have the head, hands and feet, and then everything else, like the torso, hips, and the limbs. This isn't going to be an in-depth guide for each part, but I'm going to show you a quick study on how I utilize shape to draw anatomy. So first up is the head, arguably the most complex part of the human body, though someone would probably argue that the hands are more difficult. But which one do you think is more complex? Okay, now there are different ways to draw heads, and I don't exactly stick to a single process all the time. It usually depends on the reference or the angle that I'm thinking of. But one thing is constant, which is drawing a circle whenever I start, since the head is mostly round and the circle kind of resembles the head already. So that kind of solves most of my problems. After drawing the circle, I would add some lines to determine where the head is facing. I also like adding a circle to the side of the face. By the way, I got this idea from the Loomis method, which I highly recommend you study. This circle will serve as a guideline that would connect the jaw and the ears later on. It also indicates the side of the face. After that, I would draw a cube over it to add more dimension, then add the jaw, neck, and then ears. For the face, it depends on your style preference, but for beginners, I strictly recommend sticking to a real-life reference. Even if you want an anime style, you would be able to do so much more if you learn the realistic structure first. Drawing heads is a skill that requires consistent practice and attention to detail. One of the most effective ways to improve this skill is by drawing heads over and over again, while gradually developing a memory for each angle. With enough practice, you can train your mind to recognize the subtle nuances of facial features from any angle. You can also benefit from using shapes like a cube or a sphere to help you recognize patterns in facial features. These shapes may seem basic, but they provide valuable information about the structure and proportions of the head. By mastering these simple shapes, you'll be better equipped to capture the more complex elements of a person's face. So here's a time-lapse of a stylized head study that might give you some ideas. Remember, you can't always draw a perfect face. For me, it always takes a while to execute a decent proportion, but that is exactly why we practice. One thing I noticed is that as you continue to draw and refine your skills, you may find that you no longer need to rely on the shapes at all, as you are able to visualize and create accurate drawings directly from memory. Because you've done it over and over, you would start to visualize the shapes from your mind and you would be able to draw heads more easily. Next one are hands. First, I would draw the general shape of the hand. Then I would add the 5 fingers by using lines that has 3 circles for the joints. I also like to visualize the fingers as cylinders to add more dimension. Finally, just erase the guidelines and add some details. Okay, this is probably the worst tutorial, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really that experienced in drawing hands. Compared to the other parts like the head, hands and feet are my least practiced subject, and I haven't really done an in-depth study of hands. By far, this is probably the closest study I've done. Of course, I've drawn hands before, just not as much. Surprisingly, it didn't come out as terrible as I thought it would be. For this, I just went with my instincts and just freehanded it because I thought it was easier than breaking it down with shapes, which is more ideal in my opinion. It's strange because I would avoid drawing hands as much as I can because they're really intimidating to study and really stressful. But I guess once you get used to copying reference, it would get a lot easier. Next one is the arms. The arms can be divided into 4 major shapes. We can use a circle for the shoulders, and then the cylinders for the upper arms, which extends from the shoulders to the elbow. The elbow would be a sphere, and then for the forearm, we're also going to be using a cylinder. The hands can be a simple cube or a square, since our main focus would be the arms. Once you get the solid structure, you can get a reference and build that layer of muscles. Start with the general shape of the muscles and slowly add the details. Moving on to the legs. Now the legs can also be divided, but this time with 3 shapes. You would notice that when the leg is standing straight, the leg isn't exactly a straight line. Thighs are slightly sloped, ending on the knees. You can also see this asymmetrical pattern that the muscles and bones create. Next is below the knees. I have no idea what you call them, but they're also not exactly straight. Now there are different parts of the legs that I can cover, but always remember that 3-shaped section is a great pattern to start with when drawing the legs. Finally, we have the torso and hips. The key is again laying down a proper structure for the ribs and hips. They can be visualized by using a circle and a square. The hips and the ribs would be connected with a line. This would be the spine. Then I would add a cube to the ribcage. Once you have that solid structure, you can now work on the muscles and details. Okay, I think that concludes my quick tutorial on every body part. I hope I didn't miss anything important. Yeah, I think that's most of it. Anyway, I'll probably do a longer in-depth tutorial for each body part for those who are struggling. Well, I hope this video helps, and I've also made a Patreon where I'll be uploading my sketches and some HD illustrations. See you in the next one. Peace!